ABC, Jamie here. Well, quite a week. Hope you guys are all doing okay. I think I've just about caught up on the massive sleep deficit I've had from following the news overnight for the last few days. Anyway, yeah, so I thought I would just come on here. It's been a few weeks now, and share some of the music that I've been enjoying and listening to. So, first up, aptly enough, I know this is one that Sherv had shared himself on election night, and it's something that's been more or less a constant on my turntable for the last few weeks. This is the Chicago percussionist Kahil Zabar, and this is his record America the Beautiful. Now, this was recorded, I think, in 2017, but it was released on Spirit Muse Records, which is a UK label. And this is the third of his albums that they've put out in the last, I would say, 12, 18 months. He's been really, really prolific of late. But yeah, this album really is a sort of tribute of his to his country, to many of your country who'll be watching, of course, and all of its ups and downs, its trials and tribulations, and it's a very deep spiritual record, one that feels very atmospheric. I would say it has a real depth to it, a real heaviness at times, and also some real ecstasy too. An instrumental version that's just playing in the background at the moment of America the Beautiful. Amazing cover of Express Yourself. A really, really inventive version of Mungo Santamaria's Afro Blue, which is full of polyrhythmic percussion, violin as well, and a really, really moving piece that actually closes out the record, which is Prayers for the Unwarranted Sufferings. And if you want an example of how a piece of music can move you and express a level of sorrow and emotional weight without lyrics, I urge you to go listen to that. It's a very somber but kind of powerful way to close out the album. And it's one that was just released at a perfect time, even though it was recorded 3 years ago. And it's also the final recording session of the great baritone player Hamiet Blewett as well. And he throughout plays with a huge amount of verve and characteristic vigor and spirit. So yeah, I would urge you to check this out if you haven't heard it. It's a great record. You can hear it on Bandcamp as well. I'll maybe leave the link below for you guys to follow up if you don't know it. Also this, from a fellow Chicagoan. This is the trumpet player Frank Walton, who moved very much in the same circle as Kahil Zabar and many of the AACM out of the city in the 70s and 80s. This is his only record that he put out on Delmark in 1978. This is called Reality. This also features Henry Threadgill, the great Henry Threadgill on alto, and also Ari Brown on tenor and soprano sax. Ari Brown, who's a member of the band The Awakening, who have those two records on Black Jazz that I really love that have just been reissued recently. As far as I can see, this is Frank Walton's only recording date, not just his only recording date as leader, but actually his only one full stop. And it's a kind of an interesting blend, really, of some free and experimental music, as you would maybe expect for an AACM affiliate, but also some very classic modal jazz, kind of post-bop sound. For example, a piece Shorter's Vibes, which very much connects to the sort of compositional style of Wayne Shorter. The Waltz of the Prophets as well, beautiful modal waltz. But the standout, the one that most people know, I think, off this is the track Safari, which has this really slow, thick, funky sound to it. It almost sounds like the record player's been slowed down. It's supposed to be a 45 RPM record, but it's not. It's been sampled plenty of times as well, and the drum sound on it is amazing. Yeah, so I mean, this isn't, it's not a must-own album, but there's some really cool playing on it, and yeah, it's always nice to hear something from a musician and a leader who's only put out an album or two. You really get a sense of capturing one moment of someone's creativity. But this guy will have been playing his instrument for 40, 50 years, and we're left with just this one 40-minute snapshot of their musical development, which always allows your brain to sort of think off into the distance about what else could have been and may have been that was never put to tape. Yeah, so that's Frank Walton's Reality. Something a little different from that. Paul Horn, flautist Paul Horn. This was an album of his from 1961. I think Horn's probably better known for his later records from the late 60s, early 70s, where he's really doing a lot more of his Indian inspired. I was going to say ambient music, but that's not the word that I'm searching for. It's gone out of my head here. It'll come back to me. But yeah, this is earlier on in his career where he's playing with the vibes player Emil Richards. And this is a really, really great example of everything that's good, I think, about West Coast jazz from that period. I often find a lot of that West Coast sound to be quite sterile, controlled, conservative, really lacking edge, and I think often the word cool is really a substitute for bland, but this is not that at all. On here there's a lot of interesting playing around with time signatures, not in a way that's show-offy, but just a way that allows the melodies to sort of float across bar lines. Yeah, it's again one of these albums that's sort of that early modal period where the musicians are really just starting to get to grips with the innovations from the likes of Miles Davis, Coltrane, right at the turn of the 1960s. And there's no better example of that than the piece Mirage for Miles on side one actually, last track on side one, which is very much a homage to Miles Davis, and really does have a strong nod to So What from Kind of Blue in both the melody, the kind of harmonic progression, and also the call and response between the musicians. Yeah, so really, really great example of that great West Coast sound rather than the more kind of saccharine stuff. And as with all these Columbia pressings, they sound great and they're still really cheap, really easy to get hold of. So if you're looking for some really interesting modal jazz that's maybe not in the more well-known Coltrane vein, this is a good place to start for me. Really, really interesting records. Sound of Paul Horn.
I went far, far across the sea, past soundless desert subrealities. A gentle breeze was blowing then, so soft and subtly. I stopped to take the late sunshine before the warm light ceased. I would not rest for some time on my journey to the east. Peace is what I had come searching for.
So also on that Paul Horn record was the bass player Bill Plummer, and this is a fascinating record of his, a kind of almost guilty pleasure record of mine, this one, a 1968 record that he put out on Impulse called Journey to the East. Now, Bill Plummer, along with being a bass player with Paul Horn, played with Emil Richards and Miles Davis. I think subbed in for Ron Carter for a period around 1965-66. But he also became one of the leading session musicians on the sitar, which he learned from Ravi Shankar. He was one of the first Western musicians to really learn the instrument around the same time as George Harrison was beginning to experiment with stuff on the likes of Rubber Soul and Revolver. So Plummer was really, really busy with a lot of session work in that period, playing on a lot of rock and pop records. But he also put out this on Impulse, as I mentioned, and this is with his band, the Cosmic Brotherhood, and it's a real snapshot of exactly what was happening in music right at that period. You have, obviously, his jazz background comes through here really strongly. You have the Indian influence with a whole array of musicians, not just him, sitar, there's tambura, tablas on this. Really heavy psych, kind of acid rock influence as well. And it all kind of comes together on this in a way that sounds like it's going to be either a novelty record or a total shambles. And for me, I think it's awesome. Yeah, Arc 294 is like a sort of 10-minute Indian psychedelic, almost free jazz piece, very experimental. But then alongside that, you've got a sitar-led version of Burt Bacharach's The Look of Love, which sounds like it's going to be awful, but believe me, it works. But for me, the standout on it is the first track, Journey to the East, which has, in amongst the kind of rock R&B influence with the sitar and all the percussion in there, also has Plummer overdubbed with these really like spacey, psychedelic spoken word thing, which has all the tropes you would expect of the period about consciousness and peace and exploration of your mind. And why that track hasn't appeared on more like best of psych compilations, I've no idea, because it would fit perfectly in there. But yeah, I don't know how easy this is to find anymore, but it's a really, really cool record, which even if you can't track down a physical copy, I'm sure there's versions of it streaming somewhere. It will be on YouTube, so go look this up, because it's a really, really cool record. Bill Plummer and the Cosmic Brotherhood. And sticking with kind of Eastern influence, but in a very, very different way, this is the magnificent Duke Ellington Far East Suite. This is a original mono pressing, UK pressing on RCA Victor. And this is really Strayhorn and Ellington's band at its best. Obviously, there's the great 1940s period, but this kind of later era of the band where they're putting out full-length albums rather than singles or 10-inch records. This to me is one of the, if not the high point of that later era. So this record was conceived after the band was sent, I think on behalf of the US government, as a sort of soft power tour of the East, traveling around Asia and parts of like the Middle East as well. And off the back of this, Ellington was inspired to compose a whole series of pieces with Strayhorn to sort of pay homage, tribute to the amazing cultures that they encountered while they were there. What I find amazing about this, this goes for all Ellington records, but this one especially because of the part of the world that this music is dealing with, he has the most amazing ability to capture the sound, in this case of a specific culture or country, just with voicings. Purely with voicings and chord clusters and nothing more than the musicianship of the musicians. He doesn't resort to what most records do when they're doing an Eastern version of something, which is they deploy a bunch of the native instruments. They'll maybe throw in a koto, or they'll throw in, I don't know, tambura, sitar, for example, whatever, and that's the way that they give that flavor. And when that happens, I think you often get this sort of slightly gimmicky, diluted version of the culture in a way that feels quite tokenistic. There's none of that on this at all. What you have is a much, to me, kind of purer, more genuine cross-cultural expression here, which is, just awesome. I'm not going to pick out any specific tracks on this because you need to hear the whole album. I'm sure most of you know it already. But if you don't, go look it up, and it's got many of Ellington's greatest musicians on here: Johnny Hodges, Paul Gonsalves. Yeah, awesome album. Okay, so let's move to something much more contemporary here. This came out just a couple of weeks ago on the great International Anthem label. And this is Kilo Navarros and Cheshire Holmes with their record Heritage of the Invisible. Now, these guys, for context, are the trumpet player and the drummer in the great band Irreversible Entanglements, who I've shared here before. I know a few of you guys have shared their records as well. Great kind of free jazz group who are really putting out some of the most vital, exciting music at the moment. So this is their duo record, and it's really sort of an expression of their Cuban or Puerto Rican, I think possibly, heritage, interacting with jazz and also electronic music. And it's sort of a blend of free jazz soundscapes as well. And there are moments that kind of feel in the same vein as the kind of Don Cherry, Ed Blackwell, BYG records, kind of Moo Part 1 and Part 2, and also that ECM one, what's it called? El Corazon, I think. Yeah, there are some moments that kind of reference that and touch on that, I think, where it is very much a straight dialogue between trumpet and drums. But a lot of the times here as well, there's one of the guys playing piano, or there will be some stuff with synths, drum machine. There's some moments where they're throwing in some spoken word samples as well. So this is not like a straight duo record with just two instruments. There's much more going on here. Yeah, it's a bit of a journey, this one. I think it's, like, sonically a really interesting and fun album to listen to as well. It's texturally quite varied, much more so than I was expecting when I saw that it was a duo record. So yeah, this is well worth looking up, and once again, it's another really strong outing on the label who, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, I don't think they can do any wrong at the moment. I really don't. They've got their finger right on the pulse. And last thing for this video, I think, this is Sonny Fortune with his record Long Before Our Mothers Cried. Now, if you look at this LP at face value, you got Sonny Fortune, Charles Sullivan, Stanley Cowell. It's on Strata East. It's from 1974. You think automatically, well, this is a home run record. This is going to be an absolute no-brainer. And I've got to tell you, this is, in my opinion, a really mediocre album. You know, there are some moments on here that are excellent, don't get me wrong. I think Sound of Silence, that opens side 2, really strong, kind of driving, I hate to say like classic Strata East sound, but it does have that sound that you would expect, slightly darker tinged, modal, very percussive keyboard work from Stanley Cowell, who, to be honest, is probably the strongest element on this record. And there are some moments on Long Before Our Mothers Cried that opens side 1 that I think are really good. It has this sort of slight African high life vibe to it, that really uplifting melody, a lot of polyrhythmic percussion going on there that can be engaging, but at the same time it's 14 and a half minutes and it kind of drifts. And to be honest, the thing for me that really lets this record down is the soloing, and particularly Sonny Fortune, who, you know, at the time he was in Miles Davis's band. He's on Agartha and Pangea. He brings the fire on that big time, and he does on moments here too. But I found listening to this and listening to a couple of his other records on Horizon, as well as knowing Agartha and Pangea pretty much inside out, because they're two of my favorite albums of all time, he falls into playing the same licks a lot. And actually, you hear them through the course of the album. There are some that crop up 2 or 3 times. And when you start to hear that, you just feel like it's a little bit going through the motions. It doesn't have the life or the spark to it, really. It just doesn't grab you. So, I mean, it's a great lesson, this, which I'm sure plenty of us know by now, that just because a record's on a collectible label and commands a decent price. I mean, I look up on Discogs to see what this is going for now, and there are copies for like $80, $100, $120, which to me is insane. You know, you can get $120, or actually, hang on, this is $120, let's say, okay? By contrast, I'll just dig it out here, okay? By contrast, this is the record that he put out on Atlantic in 1977, and this is a $5 record. And to me, to my money, this is twice the record of that Strata East one. You have Kenny Barron on keys, Jack DeJohnette on drums, Sammy Figueroa on congas, Jack Wilkins on guitar as well, and Horace Arnold on drums. I mean, it's kind of one of the sort of some quintessential late 70s musicians on this. But to me, this is a better album. Serengeti Minstrel, title track that closes side 2, absolute masterpiece in terms of like a multi-part, almost suite that goes through a whole gamut of textures and emotions. And, you know, equally, the Afro-Americans, which is my favorite on the album from memory. It's a 5/4 piece, if I remember right. And Woody Shaw's on this as well. That's right. Yeah, Kenny Barron on the Fender Rhodes, really just like pushing it forward. It's just really, really, really propulsive. You can't beat Jack DeJohnette, and you know you can pick this up for the equivalent of $5-10. Yeah, I don't know. I've said it already. It's a great lesson for all of us. Collectability and quality of music do not go hand in hand, and we could do well to remember that sometimes, I think. Yeah. So anyway, that's probably enough of my kind of ramblings for this video. I want to thank Davis Winchester for the shout out he gave recently. That's much appreciated, man. And hello to any new subs off the back of that. I see, I think I've just gone past 100, which is nice. Nice that there's some people watching. Yeah, so I hope there's been some cool, interesting stuff here. Yeah, leave a comment. I'll always try and reply. I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that Sonny Fortune record. But yeah, until next time, take care. Hopefully there will be a confirmed election result by the next time I make a video. Yeah, until then, take it easy. Cheers.